So if you have your Bibles, I invite you to take them out, or if you have them on your cell phone, or if you didn't bring your Bible, don't bring your cell phone, or your cell phone doesn't have a Bible, use one of the few Bibles. Turn to page 431, or 2 Chronicles chapter 7. I'm going to be reading verses 11 to 22. When Solomon had finished the temple of the Lord and the royal palace, and had succeeded in carrying out all he had in mind to do in the temple of the Lord and in his own palace, the Lord appeared to him at night and said, I have heard your prayer and have chosen this place for myself as a temple for sacrifices. When I shut up the heavens so that there is no rain, or command locusts to devour the land, or send a plague among my people, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven, and I'll forgive their sin and will heal their land. Now my eyes will be open and my ears attentive to the prayers offered in this place. I have chosen and consecrated this temple so that my name may be there forever. My eyes and my heart will always be there. As for you, if you walk before me faithfully as David your father did, and do all I command, and observe my decrees and laws, I will establish your royal throne, as I covenanted with David your father, when I said, you shall never fail to have a successor to rule over Israel. But if you turn away and forsake the decrees and commands I have given you, and go off to serve other gods and worship them, then I will uproot Israel from my land, which I have given them, and will reject this temple I have consecrated for my name. I'll make it a byword and an object of ridicule among the peoples. This temple will become a heap of rubble. All who pass by will be appalled and say, why has the Lord done such a thing to this land and to this people? People will answer, because they have forsaken the Lord, the God of their ancestors who brought them out of Egypt, and have embraced other gods, worshiping and serving them. That is why he brought all this disaster on them. This ends the reading of the Word of God for the people. And let us pray. Loving God, we thank you for your living Word and for this place, Emmanuel United Methodist, where we can come and worship you and declare your name and your goodness.
Where are you going?
We ask today that as I share this message, that you will speak to us, that you will convict and touch our hearts and change our hearts, so that, Lord, we can be faithful to you all the days of our lives, and that you may receive all glory, honor, and praise. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. I know when you hear this passage, you said, man, this is a tough one. You know, if you do this, then this will happen. And if you decide to do such, this will happen. And so when I was preparing this message and trying to figure out what to title, to name it, and I'm telling you, to be confessed before all of you, that as a preacher, I enjoy preaching, but I hate naming sermons. That's something I absolutely just hate to do. So I never come up with a cool, catchy phrase or any of that, but I decided just to name today's sermon, What If? Imagine the possibilities. And the reason why is because normally when we hear about the what if, we start asking the ifs in our lives. If this happens, usually it has a negative connotation. Usually it's like, okay, if it's going to storm, my roof is going to leak. If the hurricane comes, my house is going to blow away. If I go to the doctor, they say I'm sick. We always have this negative. Whoa, what the heck is that? Sorry about that. I don't know how that's on, but anyways. But if you don't turn off your phone, it interrupts your sermon. But anyways, I hope that no one, sorry about that. But anyways, get back on focus, Mike. All right. But what if we were to look at the if questions in our lives as something positive? That what if could actually unlock something, unlock the grace of God in our lives in new ways that maybe we did not anticipate. And so that's what we're going to try to do today. Now, I got to do a couple of disclaimers because this whole passage almost sounds like an insurance disclaimer in some ways. You know, if we do this, I'll cover that. And if you don't do this, it won't be covered under your policy. Well, it's kind of the same thing for this message. And so first of all, I'm going to give a heads up, and this is for those who consider Emmanuel their home church. So Mike, that's why I told you only listen to half of what I have to say today. He's the only person I said to do that today. But anyways, this is if you call Emmanuel your home church, okay? Just a heads up. This is a stewardship message, okay? It's actually a stewardship series. We'll be talking about it for 3 weeks, okay? So if you duck out of church next week and I don't see you the week after, I might be, getting suspicious and figure out what happened, okay? And you might be wondering, what in the world is stewardship? Well, that's the other disclaimer. There's all types of pastors out there. There are pastors that, are teachers, and there's pastors that are preachers. I'm a gag pastor, okay? And what I mean by that is, this is one of my little catchy phrases that's not really catchy, but I'm a grace and grit kind of pastor, okay? Because you're going to hear a lot about the grace of God always from me, okay? I'm going to be always pointing you the goodness and grace of Jesus, but I also have a little bit of grit. And what I mean by that is, I'm not afraid of you, okay? And I'm not afraid to tell you what you need to hear and what the church needs to hear. And so having a little bit of grit means that, it's like that little stone that no matter how much you try to grind it down or try to wear it away, it's not going away, okay? So I'm not afraid of you. I'm not planning on leaving if you get mad at me or any of that, because I believe that God has called my family and me to serve here at Emmanuel with you. So just keep that in mind. So this is going to be a kind of a grace and grit kind of sermon. And again, this whole thing is stewardship. We do dance around it because we don't like to talk about money. And here's the thing. We don't always talk about money in this church, okay? And you know that. But we will talk about it sometimes. And it's just also, stewardship is a way of kind of taking an inventory of how we're doing with the resources that God has given to us. So for some of you, stewardship might be that 6-month dental appointment. No matter how well you brush your teeth, the dentist always reminds you where you didn't brush. And it might have to be a little thing, but don't be afraid. We will get through this. The other thing that I realized coming into this sermon and as I was preparing for it this week was is that, I'm a third culture kid. I'm a third culture person. My wife's a third culture person. And our son William will be. And that means that all of us, me, Zena, and soon William, means that we were raised in a place where it was not really the homeland of our parents. And so that means that sometimes we look at things a little different than what you natives look like. Now, here's the thing about the church. We're also called to be third culture kind of people because, you know what, while we live here in earth and on this land, we have a heavenly Father. And we were born from above. So we need to be thinking a little bit differently. With that in mind, I started preparing and I started thinking about us. And one thing that I realized is that I don't live in Russia anymore, and we don't live in Russia here. We live in America. And there's some big differences in America and in Russia that I could put out that kind of inform the sermon series. First of all, is that, we live in a free country where you can choose where to worship, and the government doesn't tell you where you should worship. So that's something that I take very seriously here. The other thing to keep in mind is that in Russia, people do something weird, and that is they fix things. So here in the U.S., when things are broken or worn out, what do? We throw it away and we buy something new. Well, in Russia, man, they fix everything. I mean, they fix your shoes. Russia's the one place where you can go today and see a refrigerator that was made in 1970 and it's still being used in the household because people just things were made to last, and they said, okay, we can't throw anything away, we don't have any money, and we gotta, keep on fixing these things. Another thing that they do is they do things like sharpening knives. So you don't see anyone in Russia buying never needs sharpening knives, because in there, every knife needs to be sharpened. And so they have this mentality of that. Or also, they like to pickle things, and they don't pickle things because it's good for my sandwich, but they pickle things because it's survival, because, winter is coming, and so you have to prepare for winter, and so that means when you have vegetables, you pickle them so they'll last, and you'll have something to eat through the winter. And then the last thing about Russia that I realized that's different, and that we're not here living in Russia right now, is that comfort is not something that people desire, or is not a premium there. So comfort, you'll never hear anything about comfort in Russia. So churches are not comfortable there. Like restaurants are not comfortable. People are afraid to go to restaurants. They really eat at home. There's just a whole other mentality. Why I say all these things is because sometimes in the church, we act like we are living in Russia. We act like that we serve a God who has very limited, finite resources. We act like that we have this God that when something is broken or whatever, that we can't fix it, we just got to live with it broken. Where we have a God that likes to fix things. We have a God that likes to make all things new. Another thing is that we have this mentality that, that there's scarcity sometimes. Sometimes churches are the worst culprits of this. They have a scarcity mentality. They think that there is no money, or there are no resources, and so what do we have to do? We have to live on pickles for the rest of our lives. No, we don't have to do that, okay? God provides more than enough of what we need. And so there's a different mindset, a shift that we have to have take place. So for example, the building, okay? We have to take care of our building. Yes, we have to fix it, but sometimes we have this mentality that, we have to fix the roof. Yes, we have to fix the roof. When are we going to fix the roof? Well, we're not going to fix it until it rains, And that is like what we do in Russia all the time. We wait for disasters to come, and then we do something. But what if instead of living in fear and living in have a scarcity mentality, we start seeing how big our God is? In today's scripture lesson, in 2 Chronicles, this is the start of something completely new. And just 2 Chronicles is a little tricky. And the reason why is because here we have this passage that's talking about the dedication of the first temple in Israel. So we're talking about this period around like 920 AD, okay, roughly, okay? So that's when we're talking about. But when was this written? This was written probably around like 430 AD. Why? Why is there such a big gap? Why almost a 500-year gap between what happened and what we're reading today? Well, I'm going to talk a lot about this, and you probably hear it a lot in my last sermons about how the Israelites were put into exile, and how they lost everything, and then they had to come back. Well, this is the period when they were coming back from exile, when this was written. And so their temple was destroyed. They lost their land. They lost their promises, and now they're having to come back. And there's this historian that said, you know what? I'm going to summarize everything that we have in the Holy Scripture in 2 books, and it's going to be called 1st and 2nd Chronicles. And so basically, it's like the concise history. It's like the high school version of the history of Israel. And it actually starts from creation, and it goes up to the point of exile. And so what it does is, what's the important thing about history is it shows us where we went wrong, and what things we shouldn't repeat in the future, and what things we should. You're adults saying that hindsight is 20/20. Well, that's what this is all about. It is hindsight. And so, and it tells the history in a very positive way. So when we read about Solomon, here's the thing, okay? Solomon was named one of the wisest kings of all of the history of Israel. And he built one of the grandest temples. In the ancient world, Solomon was a world leader that was to be respected. And so after he did his great big things of building his huge palaces, he endeavors on doing something monumental, and that is to build a permanent place for the people of God, the Israelites, to be able to worship. And where a place where the Spirit of God can dwell. That was his priority. And so when he builds this, and we just come off the cusp of the dedication, all of a sudden God responds to all the great work that Solomon did. And it was, if my people. If my people. So to start out this stewardship series, and as I'm praying for Emmanuel and thinking about where is God directing us as a church, my question is what would happen? What would happen in this church? What would happen in our lives if we humbled ourselves and prayed? And I'm talking about real prayer. I'm talking about the prayer that you put some sweat and grit into it. I'm talking about the prayer where you start seeking God and you start really following this blueprint that we see in the Bible. What would happen to us? You see, this is a blueprint for the Israelites when they were starting something new. When they were rebuilding the broken temple. When they were coming back to re-inhabit the land that God had promised them. They said, we got to learn from our past. We got to figure out what happened, what went wrong, so that we will not repeat history again. And that's why this is written here. It's a warning from God. It's an encouragement from God to say, hey, you know what? No matter how, if you missed the mark and you went totally off track, and you know what? Bad things came. Because you know what? There's military powers that come, but then there's also natural disasters. You have famines in the land. You have locusts that come in and mess up your crops. Stuff happens. Stuff happens to us too. It does rain. Hurricanes do come. We do have floods in the building sometimes. Our cars do break down. These things happen, and we should not be alarmed at them. But sometimes we church people have this mentality that we live in another world. And what I'm saying is, it's like we don't maintain our cars, we don't change our tires, we don't change the oil, and then we get mad at God when the tires blow out and then the engine burns out, It's like, where do we live, okay? And it's the same with the church, okay? We built this wonderful building, this place where people have told the story, how they have come to faith, how their children came to faith, how they had weddings here, how they had confirmations here, how they had youth choirs here. And then all of a sudden, we get surprised when we actually have to do something like, okay, the roof is getting in trouble, or air conditioners get fixed. That's why I mentioned about comfort. For example, in Russia, if the air conditioner went out, they wouldn't care. They just keep the windows shut and you just sweat in church. That's just how it is. That's how I lived for 4 years, okay? But here, if the air conditioner goes out, it is a disaster. People start complaining, people start getting mad, like, well, let's go to another church that has air conditioning. That's just what people do. But what if the church, if we start just changing our compass a little bit, and just get realigned with what are God's priorities? What does God desire from us? What kind of change can happen in our lives? What I love about this is that, again, it was written when everything got really messed up. And God's saying, no matter how bad you mess things up, no matter how bad it looks so terrible that you can't even see the building anymore, if you do these things, I will hear you. I will hear you from heaven. And I'll come down and I'll fulfill those promises. The scripture today is very clear, and I don't have to go and expound on any kind of Greek or Hebrew or anything like that, but it's very clear, and I want us to just try to put this into practice. If my people who are called by my name, every one of us is called by the name of God, would first humble themselves. In order to humble yourself, you have to realize that you are not God, and that it's not about you. This is the hard thing for us in America. I get it, because we are all about me and about my needs and my comforts and about just, what's in it for me. That's what we say. But if we can humble ourselves and say, God, you are God, and it's all about you, and that I am not self-sufficient. I need help. That's the first step. Is will we humble ourselves and say, God, you know what? We need some intervention. We need some outside help. If they humble themselves and pray, I'm talking about just opening our hearts and saying, God, no more secrets. No more hiding behind religiosity. No more running from you. God, this is what's going on in my life. We have a hard time praying. We are all about doing and acting and making plans, and then when that plan doesn't work out because we didn't even do the work, we just make another plan. I mean, that's what we do sometimes. But what would happen if we just got serious and started praying and saying, God, we really need you. We need a fresh move of your Spirit in this place. Seek my face. I want to be honest with you. There are a lot of things that consume our time. One thing I realize is like trying to keep up with like learning what's going on in the community and keeping up with things in the States. You know, I noticed that I start spending way too much time on social media. There are things that consume our time, and I hate to say this, but some of you who say you don't have time to pray or don't know how to pray and all that are wasting your gift of time by looking and liking kitty cats. Yeah. I'm telling you, some of you are spending way too much time on Facebook. Some of you, and younger people are going way too much, you're tweeting way too much. I'm hearing, and some of you are just taking too many pictures and too many selfies. We're doing too much of this stuff. Some of us are spending way too much time watching TV, and we're doing all this stuff, and here's what I'm asking you to do. Let's start putting this to practice. I think almost every one of you would agree that we need to humble ourselves. We need God. We need to pray. But let's seek God's face. And how do we do that? I want to challenge you to take a moment and say, okay, Lord, for one day, I'm going to give up one of those time-consuming habits that I have. One day, I'm not going to touch Facebook. One day, I'm not going to watch any TV. One day, I'm not going to gossip. We won't talk about that this day. But anyways, one day, we're going to give up something, and we're going to replace it by seeking God's face, wanting to know the will and heart of God. And so I want to challenge you to read the Bible. Maybe try to just read First and Second Chronicles. You might need more than a day, but try to see what will happen if you do that. If we seek God's face, if we humble ourselves, if we pray, and then the other thing, turn from our wicked ways. Now, man, that sounds harsh. Doesn't it? Turn from our wicked ways. We don't like to say that we've done wicked ways. We like to say, oh God, we made a mistake. Or God, we wandered off course, which we have in some things. But if we're really honest, when we depart from the things of God, it hurts us. It hurts our community. It hurts those around us. You know, I love these Meet Pastor Mike meetings. I get a chance to really meet you. And I hear about your vision in the church and what got you into this church. And one thing I hear from the very beginning is this. We want young people in our church. There has not been one meeting that I went to where someone said, we want young people in our church. And then what usually happens after that is everyone tells me how they started coming to church. And if you've been in this church for more than 10 years, usually it has something related to children's ministry. That's just been the statistic. The majority of people that have been in this church for more than 10 years had some kind of connection with children's ministry. And they talk about the children's choir. They talk about all these classrooms that we have divisions for every kid and all these great things. Well, I got something to tell you, church. Somehow, we got off course. And when I say our wicked ways is that there are a lot of kids in this neighborhood. There are a lot of kids that are in this school district that are that have broken homes, that have broken lives, that and the kids are doing horrible things to themselves, cutting themselves, starving themselves, bullying others, and some kids are even committing suicide. I mean, this is real. And the one thing that this church can do is be a voice and a place for them. Now, the mission of Emmanuel, I've been digging in this church, and that has been always a priority. And I don't think any of you would say, I know you guys are lovely people. You guys have big hearts. You care a lot. And I know also that if I said, you know what, we have a need right now, you guys would do your very best to respond. I know that 100%. Even like we're discussing the pumpkin patch, we said, hey, we got to get back on children's ministry. I said, let's put the money in the pumpkin patch and children's ministry. I mean, this is the way this church responds. But here's the thing. Somehow, we lost focus of making that part of our mission, being a church for everybody. I've also been meeting a lot of new pastors in this community. And some of you have been telling about these other churches. People say, well, you don't do this, so I go to a church that does this, or I go to that church that does that. And I know we have a buffet full of churches that you can pick from, and I get that. But one thing I will say is that the churches that have student ministry, children and youth ministry, or that have grief care and all these things, or have a great visitation, whatever that vision that church has, they put their money and they put their resources and their energy to it. And if we want a significant change in our church, as we are praying and seeking God, you know what? We got to see where we went off. And there's a couple things. There's three things that we need in everything to survive in the church. We need God. We need the living presence of God. And the name of Jesus needs to be lifted up, and people need to have a fresh encounter of God and know that God can change their lives and resurrect anything. The other thing that we need, and these are the other two things that people don't like to talk about, is time and money. That's the reality. Most problems in the world will be fixed by these three things working together: God, time, and money. And that is basically, you want children in this church, you better start praying. But when you start praying, be prepared, because God will answer. And when God answers, we have to put some resources. We're going to have to pony up. And that means that we're going to have to say, okay, Lord, you know what? I'm going to dedicate time to this ministry. Right now, as I speak, we have 2 adult volunteers that are almost always every week in one place in Court Hall. Kip Osteen and Tara Sullivan, and they are working with our children. They're putting their time and their energy for it. And I know that whenever they have a need or request, they always say they'll bring it before the church, and the church will respond. But here's the thing. We got to shift things. Instead of waiting for them to bring their requests and need to us, we need to be going after them. We need to be pursuing the children and youth in our church. We need to be pursuing those young parents. We need to be pursuing those people that are newly retired. If we want them to be in our church, we have to start dedicating our resources and our time. We start praying and seeking God's face. We start putting the time, investing time. And then the other thing, putting money. Because if you don't have the time, then pay someone else who does have the time, and let us get it done. Because I guarantee you, in all those other churches that you always compare Emmanuel to, all the other bigger churches that are bigger than us, the giants in the land and all that, we're actually on our team because we're all Team Jesus. Can I get an amen for that? We're Team Jesus, right? Good. So, all of those got these big ministries. Here's the thing. They dedicate pastors to these things. They dedicate leaders to it. So they dedicate, a whole team for children's staff, whole team for youth staff, whole team for outreach. That's how it has to work. Now, the cool thing about this church is that we are living within our means. We are living within our means. We're doing our very best to keep up with what we have. But here's the thing, though. I believe that God's going to do some great things in this church. And some of us just can't see it yet. And so that's why I'm asking you, for the very first step of this stewardship series, is to humble yourself. To pray. To seek God's face. And to turn away from anything that we have done wrong or we have missed on. Let's just start with that and see what God will do. Because I believe that God's Spirit is going to come in here and it's going to bring a revival to this place. The cool thing is, what I love about Emmanuel is that there were a bunch of people that were before us that had vision. That said that St. Paul's and it said that First United Methodist was not enough. That we got to build a church out on this little road called Eau Gallie. Apparently the road that didn't go all the way through, which I'm still trying to figure out. You got to show me a map. But it did go all the way through. But they built a church here. And then they started reaching out to the community, and they started doing stuff with kids and children and youth, and they realized that this building was not enough. So they started building education wings. And then they started building fellowship hall. They said it wasn't enough. They didn't say build it, they will come. They were already doing the work, doing it, building it, and all that. and they had to build the buildings to keep up with what God was doing. And I believe that if we get back on focus, or maybe just shift our focus, maybe God will shift our church. Will you please pray for us? Let us pray. Loving God, we thank you that you are challenging us. And Lord, I ask that you continue to work in our hearts. Lord, we know that hindsight is 20/20, and we're not here to lift up or tear down what was done in the past. But God, this is our hour. This is our time. And Lord, I ask that before we come up with an idea to fix this place or do this or do that we will seek your face. Help us, oh God, to cut out the time of liking kitty cats and start loving you. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.